possession with close to around 67% of the ball, while Arsenal got 37%. And this meant that Manchester City had majority of possession. And how did Manchester City manage to dominate this strong, effective, and robust machine created by Mikel Arteta? So Manchester City built it from the back, and Arsenal looked to try and stop Manchester City build up by pressing them aggressively high. So Arsenal would take something more of a 4-4-2 pressing structure, with Havertz joining Gyökeres, or even sometimes in this case, Havertz dropping slightly deeper to cover one pivot, while Declan Rice will look to be the one joining him, with Zubimendi being tasked to cover Ryan Cherki. Now, this created issues because Arsenal wanted to force Manchester City to play the ball on one side, where Bukayo Saka will now move on to Nathan Ake, and in particular, Arsenal will shift their entire backline with Ben White looking to stop O'Reilly from getting to the ball. The main intention for Arsenal was to try and force Manchester City wide, then use the aggressive touchline to win the ball. But however, Arsenal forgot one thing. Manchester City's right-hand side was generally Manchester City's most strongest side. And we saw the way Manchester City looked to find, in particular, Krusunov, with Rodri dropping deep to receive a pass directly from the goal Trafford and then lay the ball to Krusunov. Now, once Krusunov gets the ball, he will now attract pressure from the right, in particular Trossard, who will step up to press him, and then Matheus Nunes will play in that right back position. So what we will see is Cherki will drop, receive the ball while dragging Zubimendi out, and then looking to create that overload together with Nunes, and then look to slip the ball forward for the runs of Semenyo. That was one way in which Manchester City tried to stop Arsenal. Another way that Manchester City tried to do this was again by the use of both Cherki in particular, dropping deep, especially when Zubimendi tries to go and cover Matheus Nunes, allowing Cherki to always be that free man in between the lines to get to the ball. And this is actually what caused problems for Arsenal when they faced Manchester City, because Manchester City kept on generating this overload. So let me just show you a clip of how Manchester City were looking to create these problems. Here is Manchester City building from the back. You can see the way Arsenal are trying to press, and you can see that space that has been created that Nunes has looked to actually carry the ball forward to. In this case here, you can see the position of Ryan Cherki and the position of Semenyo. Here again, Manchester City look to build from the back, and you can see how they are looking to pin Arsenal deeper and deeper and deeper. Now, because Manchester City were looking to create these overloads, especially down the right, with the position of Matheus Nunes and the position of Cherki, and even sometimes Bernardo Silva joining that forward line position, it always meant that they were pinning Arsenal deeper and deeper and deeper. And that meant that Arsenal were even at some point unable and crowding their box with as many as all 11 Arsenal players moving inside that own box. So let me try and explain to you how Manchester City looked to break this down. Now, Arsenal now realizing that Manchester City are busy playing through them, they decided now to try and have their players move deeper and deeper. So Guardiola's main role was to push O'Reilly into this left half space channel, then move Manchester City into a back three. Now, this back three was super interesting because Arsenal have always known a way of playing against this Manchester City side, and it's by using that narrow front four. Now, this was where the problem came. Because Bernardo Silva was now instructed by Pep to move into that number 10 position and occupy zone 14, it meant that in particular Cherki was the one who was free to actually get to the ball. And whenever Arsenal will push their player to try and cover and press Matheus Nunes, Cherki will get the ball. And because of the position of Bernardo Silva, this will mean that both Zubimendi and Rice will not have the latitude to step out and cover him. And therefore, Cherki will get the ball, then see Semenyo making that overlapping run, then look to play the ball to Semenyo, and Semenyo looks to cross the ball inside the box. But not only was Semenyo getting himself in these positions, sometimes we also saw that because of Cherki dropping in this right back position, we started to see in particular Trossard being the one to move into this position to try and cover Cherki, allowing Matheus Nunes to carry the ball and look to play the ball directly forward onto the runs of Matias Nunes, who crossed for the first goal. What about Arsenal? What did Arsenal actually try to do when they were in these deeper phases of possession? Now, Arsenal were quite were quite restricted with what they used against Manchester City, and Manchester City opted to use the narrow 4-2-4, very narrow, having their forward line being extremely narrow. Now, what did this do? This meant that Manchester City always used their forward players to try and stop Arsenal's wide centre backs from progressing. I want you to see this clip. Look at how narrow Manchester City's forwards are. Their main aim is zonal marking, not man marking. Zonal marking. They are looking to remain so narrow and only use their wingers in a situation where the ball is played to the touchline. Look here again. Arsenal are so narrow. They are allowing Kepa all the space in the ball, and they are allowing their backline to stay deeper to cover Arsenal, so that whenever Arsenal choose to go long, Manchester City can win the second balls. Now, because Manchester City were playing in this narrow structure, it meant that Arsenal had only the option of going wide, and once they went wide, this is where Manchester City came alive by looking to utilize the wide areas as the touchline, playing as an extra man in possession. And Arsenal and Manchester City was so patient in this 4-4 structure because they knew that they would tempt Arsenal to play line-breaking passes. And once these line-breaking passes were played, Manchester City would win the ball and look to hit Arsenal in transition. You can see here Manchester City in this narrow 4-4. Arsenal, in this particular Zubamendi, attempts to try to play the ball through the lines. Here again, Kepa has the ball. Manchester City are not looking to press Kepa, but rather to play in that narrow 4-4. Their main aim is to ensure that Arsenal do have the ball in areas where they can't hurt them. So as much as Kepa tries to come out with the ball, he has no option, but rather to play the ball to the centre back. Here again, Kepa decides to go long. Manchester City win the ball back and immediately continue. Here now, Manchester City are in a much deeper phase, again in that narrow 4-4, looking to stay narrow and stop any central progression by Arsenal. Here again, Manchester City in that narrow 4-4. So Guardiola's system of playing with that 4-4 narrowly meant that Arsenal did not have any opportunity to play through Manchester City. And whenever they did, Manchester City would win the ball and look threatening. So Guardiola becomes the manager to have won the most Carabao Cups in Premier League and English history. And he did this because of his incredible tactics.